guys.
Okay.
I have to do something called keep the government open. We're hoping to finish tonight, but I got to go back and work out all these amendments and other things, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Keep that government going, which is, of course, the job of Congress, but okay. All right. I rode up to Capitol Hill the other day, and I was in an Uber, and I rolled down the window, and there was someone having a press conference or doing a TikTok or whatever the heck they do up there. And I yelled, "Do your job," really loud. I don't think it may have worked. It actually may have worked. I'm very excited for the government to keep operating. Anyway, there's a lot to talk about. Briefly, you all mentioned generative AI and different things like that, but let's start with nuclear weapons, because FAS has the strong historical tie to it, and the conflicts the U.S. is most worried about, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, China, Taiwan, Israel, and Gaza, they all involve states that possess nuclear weapons. I guess, Senator Young, I'm going to start with you. How should we be thinking about the nuclear risks in context of global risks and urgent needs for this government?
Well, thank you for the question. So nuclear weapons can play a very important role in maintaining stability, preventing large-scale sorts of conflicts. That's the doctrine of deterrence. Mm-hmm. But my reading is it's actually the same as my former boss, Dick Lugar, who spent a lifetime advocating for, at once, a robust nuclear arsenal so that we can maintain deterrence. But at the same time, he consistently advocated for fair-minded and honest strategic arms talks and limitation agreements, which gave us visibility into foreign arsenals, it built trust, and it lowered the overall arsenal count of the United States and our adversaries, which, among other things, reduce the risk of a miscalculation. So, to maintain peace and to prevent a horrible disaster, I think it requires discernment to balance those two dynamics. But I do think in this modern era they have to be balanced. I think there's renewed emphasis on and concern about the democratization of terror, which may happen as artificial intelligence continues to add to the ability for non-state actors, small states and others to get access to technologies, including nuclear technology, and develop arsenals when heretofore they may have lacked the ability to do so. But my understanding, based on the consultations with some scientists who study these things even more than I, is that there are still some pretty significant technical barriers to that happening. But nonetheless, we need to guard against that risk, because whatever the probability mm-hmm. of non-state actors or other malign actors getting access to these weapons, the cost could be very, very high. So low probability, high cost. This is a fairly math proficient audience. We know these are the sorts of risks we should be guarding against, right?
So, Christopher, your movie was about the dawn of this age and the worries that they had, and some of the true worries of where this would lead, and the ability of humans to have good judgment about these massive, powerful weapons. Talk about the link between today and your movie, because there are very, very clear linkages that I think you were trying to communicate.
Our concern with and fear of nuclear weapons, at least in my lifetime, it's ebbed and flowed with the geopolitical situation. And I think anybody doing any kind of research into it, into the history of nuclear weapons and into the practical realities of them, it's not a good thing that our fear of it or our concern of it would ever ebb. Because even in a stable geopolitical situation, there are all kinds of, senators talking about non-state actors. I mean, for example, the collapse of the Soviet Union was obviously a very positive thing in terms of the stability in the world geopolitically, but it was one of the most dangerous times there's ever been in terms of nuclear weaponry, where it was, who would have access to it, and so forth. And so I think a lot of the work that's been done on non-proliferation, a lot of the work that's been done to reduce the number of weapons in the world, as I said, it's very positive, and it's work that needs continuing attention. But when I first said to my teenage son, one of my teenage sons, I have plenty of them, but when I said what I was working on and starting to write, he actually said to me, he said, but people my age aren't interested in that. We're not concerned about that. We don't think about that. And I found that a little scary. My response was, well, Oppenheimer's story and this change in the world is an incredibly dramatic story anyway. And so that was the basis on which I sort of carried on. But I also said, well, maybe it's a reason to make the film. You know, I don't make films to be didactic, and I don't make them to send messages into the world or whatever. But it did occur to me in that moment that, you know, that maybe the time is ripe for, if you like, a refresher course in Armageddon and the potential of Armageddon in the pop culture. Because I think pop culture has a very important part to play in what we're concerned about as human beings, what we worry about in the world. And I think as far as, you know, today, you know, the geopolitical situation once again has deteriorated in all kinds of ways. By the time we started filming, Russia had invaded Ukraine, and the whole conversation had changed in the most horrible and frightening way. And I think the linkage with AI is interesting. When I never thought for a minute that when Oppenheimer was finished, the film was finished, that a lot of the questions I would get on my publicity tour would be about artificial intelligence. And in speaking to people involved with AI, you know, they literally, some of them would refer to it as their Oppenheimer moment, this moment in time. The idea that they really need now to look at, we all need to be looking at unintended consequences of a new technology. One of the interesting things that I think is relevant to all of this is that, for me, one of the most interesting discoveries about the history was to realize that the conflict between the civilian scientists and the military at Los Alamos was really built on one basic difference of understanding, which was, to scientists, knowledge is knowledge, and knowledge is owned by everyone. You can't own it and guard it and keep it to yourself. The truth will out. You're talking about facts of nature. So splitting the atom and the energy that was released, it's just a fact. It's a fact of nature, and everyone will ultimately have it. The military believed that through the security apparatus, they could contain the threat. And I think that you see the argument on both sides, but ultimately the scientists were right. You know, truth in the world, facts in the world, they're going to be available to everybody ultimately. And so really what you have to look at is how you control the uses of a particular technology.
Sure, absolutely. So let's get to AI, because one of I spend a lot of time talking to all the leaders in AI right now, and it's largely corporate people, and it's corporate people at giant companies. And it's a very small group of people. And one of the statistics that really jumped out at me is in 1963, I think 69% of the work being done in advanced technology was done by the government or run by the government, who are accountable to the people. Whatever you think about everybody, they are accountable to the people. 73% of AI is now owned and operated by companies, and a very small handful of them. And knowing them all, that gives me some worries, I'll be honest with you, because there's a lot of issues around their ability to make these decisions. Dr. Richmond, can you talk a little bit about that? Because besides implicit bias, social justice, all kinds of things that are going on, it is the ability to use these not as a tool, of which there are many in healthcare and all kinds of transportation. It's also the ability to use it as a weapon. So can you talk a little bit about the worries that, as a government official, you have around generative AI and the advances? We are at a moment, one of these moments.
Well, thank you for that question, because it certainly is one on everyone's mind now, and there are certainly concerns about it, and there are also opportunities. In the Department of Energy, since World War II, we've had to deal with mitigating risk. And in fact, we are in charge of security in the nuclear era. We have been historically, and AI is part of our responsibility to make sure that we have the technologies to be able to mitigate and find out when there are going to be problems with AI that could lead us to be less secure as a nation.
Sure.
So what we are doing in the Department of Energy, we have the largest and fastest computers in the world. That is what you need in order to develop the AI, the foundational models that we need in order to be ahead of the world and have the kind of, be able to identify when there's a problem coming down, when there are algorithms that are dangerous. And so in the Department of Energy, all the 17 national laboratories are working on this. This is a huge army that's working on artificial intelligence, on quantum, on security, because that is our mission, on safety in addition to climate change. So we have a new initiative called FAST. That's Frontiers for AI in Science, Technology, and Security. And with that, we are proposing to develop the foundational model for science and technology that really will lead the world and the nation, help the nation go through the critical situation that we are right now and the fast evolving AI that's around us.
Sure, but it's really controlled by several corporations at this point in terms of the leading LLMs, where the money, the investments are being made, where people are being employed. It started with DeepMinds, which Google bought. Obviously, Facebook plays a big role. Amazon, the people that brought you social media, are in charge of this.
They are, but they're in charge of a certain aspect of AI.
Okay.
So that's more the commercial side of it. Our work is to take, we're basically the largest data generator in the world, the labs are. And so we take that scientific data, the technology data, in order to develop these language models that are critical to be able to basically be ahead of the kind of threats that we are concerned about.
Right.
That's a very different type of algorithms and models that companies are doing. That said, we're working very closely with companies on this because we want them to understand what we're doing and then work with them too. So I think that, again, if we're going to, for the nation's interest, we need to be leading in AI.
Absolutely.
You know, the train is going and we can't be jumping on the train late because we haven't had enough funding to be able to do it.
Well, one of the issues is, of course, it was invented here. All the leading companies are here. But right now, President Biden is meeting with President Xi. And one of the arguments that I've gotten from tech leaders, specifically, most recently Mark Zuckerberg, is you have to let these national champions compete and control and own a lot of this stuff and reap the benefits from it because of China, for example. And I called it the G or me argument. And I was like, I don't like either choice. What is my third choice? Because I would really like another one that has more responsibility and maybe not you running it, for example. No insult intended, I guess a little bit of an insult intended, but I would like accountable people. So talk about the role of government in that, the idea of where government needs to make these investments. This CHIPS Act was critically important, but so long in coming. And it seems like government's abrogated its responsibility in space, which is now run by two people that like to wear cowboy hats badly. Go see the photo. In transportation, same thing. In all kinds of critical areas. It seems to have abrogated its responsibility in terms of really investing in these things. The government invented the internet. And everybody else benefited but the American people, except they got a dating service, I guess. But talk a little bit about that, of what the government's roles should be, because there's also pushes in Congress right now for cutbacks in these kind of things.
Yeah. So this is in large measure what these AI insight forums you may have heard about are designed to discern. Is we convene some of the world's foremost minds, many of whom happen to work at technology companies, but not exclusively, many of whom are government employees, and then civil society representatives and others, and try and, on a cross-cutting way, determine what government should do, what government shouldn't do, and without exception. Even, and these are behind closed doors meetings, but even people you think would balk at any government regulation, techno-libertarian, they at least tell us, no cameras there, no one's saying their name.
Yeah.
But that
I
government
don't love
does.
that they're behind closed doors, but that's just me. But go ahead.
Yeah,
Since I-
government does have a role to provide some regulation, create certainty as much as anything else. I'm under no illusion. Some of them want us to regulate more heavily than probably we should, right? So that they can capture more market share and squeeze out any would-be competitors. So you always got to be worried about that. But here are my reflections. I think most people agree with the general sentiment that most of what people are concerned about, bias, misinformation, consumer protection, explainability, the prohibitions that we think should occur are already in some way captured in our law because they reflect our values. We have laws on privacy, we have laws on bias and so forth. But the ability to adapt those laws to an AI-enabled society is something that we're not fully equipped to do in government yet. We need to get good at this quickly, but some of it's going to require recruiting far more talent than we have, training the talent and recruiting it into government, and then retaining these individuals, or at least having access to AI proficient individuals so that we can take what Congress captures in our statutes and come up with the real granular work of developing regulations and working with entities that produce these models, that sell them, et cetera. That has to be done. I think that's, again, the majority of the work. Will there be some unique areas that require entirely new legislation? Yeah, there will. There will. We'll need new research and additional research, although I will say the Endless Frontier part of the CHIPS and Science Act authorizes tons of research money at the National Science Foundation and at DOE. So Congress is, in a bipartisan way, already authorized this. We just need to appropriate it.
Yeah, you're at $7.5 billion short. Yeah.
We'll need to, on an ongoing basis, harmonize our regulate. 7.5 billion?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Are you thinking that's a lot? That's not a lot.
It's not a lot.
As compared to, the overall budget and the economy.
That's what Elon Musk keeps in his Tesla trunk. But go ahead.
That's right. We need to harmonize. We need to harmonize our regulations across geographies.
Got it.
We've already started this. G7, EU, UK just had a safety meeting, which included China, incidentally. So that's going to be an important piece of the work. There will be some one-off areas where we have to rethink our threshold for misinformation, for example. Elections. Do we want far more disclosure as it relates to misinformation in the era of deepfakes? Maybe we do. Maybe we don't. So, these all have to be debated. I do think the one area, I'll close with this, the one area that I really think we're going to have to get a better handle on is this democratization of terror. There are a lot of people in the great state of Indiana who have fermenters. They're in the biology business at home. They have fermenters in their garage or in their house or in their small business. They can get on the internet right now without the assistance of advanced AI technologies, and they can figure out how to make new biological organisms improve upon those found in nature in various ways. But what if you're trying to improve upon a germ and its ability to attack human beings or livestock or what have you? It's really concerning.
Yeah.
So
I think that was the plot of The Last of Us, but go ahead. It was.
And now it's a possibility.
Yes,
so
100%.
What I typically will hear from the innovators, and there's a certain force to it, which is, well, the best answer to all of these threats is to defeat their AI with our better AI. Sounds a little incongruous, sounds kind of like turtles all the way down. But I actually think that many of the threats will be met with faster processing, better models, et cetera. We'll innovate our way out of this just as we have innovated our way out of other threats throughout history.
That is certainly always what we think is going to happen, though there hasn't been one bit of legislation on the internet in 25 years. Not one piece, in fact. But go ahead, Chris.
Well, my concern with your response a little bit is the existing tech company playbook is to say, please regulate us, oh, but it's too complicated, you don't understand it.
Right.
I think we do understand how to regulate this. I don't think we need massive amounts of expertise along those lines. I think we have the most wealthy and innovative tech companies in the world. They're perfectly capable of dealing with some blunt regulation that gives us all safety guidelines. And the thing that everybody is missing when they have this discussion about AI is essentially a glorified search engine. It's about the information and who controls the information. So if we allow our private companies to give the information away willy-nilly, and I come at this from a particular angle because it involves violating my copyrights and just throwing my work into the hopper of AI, and this is the reason that the WGA and SAG have been on strike all summer. We know what goes into the source. The details, not unlike the era in which Microsoft was being broken up or whatever, we know what's best for society. The idea that we would innovate our way out of it, well, we innovated our way into it. And I think if we prize innovation above all else, above our own safety, I'm concerned about that because, as you say, no, there's been
I don't think
no
anyone
legislation.
said that, to be clear. I don't think anyone said we even without concern for our own safety. I think the argument has been made that one of the hedges against jeopardizing our safety is to ensure that our models are faster and have more facility than others' models.
Yeah, like having a hydrogen bomb if they have an atomic bomb,
And
and that. But the
I don't
issue.
think the nuclear analogy fits every potential risk.
It doesn't. You're quite right. And in one very important way and one very frightening way, it doesn't fit, which is it takes an enormous amount of time and money to make a nuclear weapon, and that's the thing that's really kept us safe. AI does not take an enormous amount of time and money. If we give all of the information in the world without restraint to companies in other countries, in our country, if they have the ability to draw from that entire pool, it's not expensive for them to produce AI.
We're not in disagreement. I feel like you may be trying to create more space than there is.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
I do think government understands it better than you think, too, because I think you regulate cars, you regulate planes. They're not falling out of the sky every day, like they don't. They're very safe.
Right.
You regulate a lot of things that are complex. It's that Silicon Valley has convinced you that they're magicians, and they're not.
Well, they've managed to create a dialogue around not looking at effects, looking at causes, as if we all have to understand exactly what goes into the sausage to know that we don't want to eat the sausage.
We've got to zip up soon, but I want one question. When you think about your movie, this was a great, huge government effort, and an effort with private scientists and public people. How would you look at that today of creating something like that? Do you see?
I think it's complicated because obviously it's a weapon that was being built, that needed to be built in the time it was built. We tried in the film as best we could to get across the enormous resources that went into that. So, I read somewhere, someone will have to fact check this, but the number of American lives that are touched by the manufacture of the Manhattan Project was about 600,000 Americans. It was the entire country coming together to make this weapon at this necessary time. It's difficult to find examples in the modern era. Possibly the Apollo missions and the great days of NASA. But we're certainly living in a moment or in a period in which, certainly as Americans, we feel more comfortable letting private industry innovate in these ways. And that's been very, very successful technologically and economically for the last few decades. So I don't know, the world's changed essentially, and thankfully we're not in a moment of enormous crisis the way they were in 1942.
So I want to end with one question. How do you, each of you, think we need to communicate this to the American people? Because, there's a direct democracy movement happening all over the country where people don't like what their legislators are doing and moving it to a direct democracy. How do you get, in this world where there's so much confusion, so much of a flood of not just misinformation, but there's something called the liar's dividend when the truth is then questioned and it makes the truth seem like a lie. There's all kinds of things happening and it's very convoluted. Christopher is only referring to it a little bit in terms of what's happening to his information that's getting you know, there's going to be a Christopher Nolan-like movie made by AI at some point, if they ingest enough Christopher Nolan. How do you communicate to the American people these challenges? I'd love each of you to finish up talking about that. And then lastly, each of you talk about what do you think the greatest fear that you have going forward and the greatest asset you think we have going forward. Why don't we start with you and go down?
Well, I think in terms of communication, scientists could do a better job of being able to communicate to people what the impact of the science that they have. And I've seen, you know, I've been in this business for over 40 years, and I've seen improvements in that, but we can always do more. But it's not just talking, it's listening. It's really listening to what people's concerns are, and then being able to respond, rather than just blast with equations or whatever, not to say that all scientists do that. But I think, you know, what I really worry the most about is the workforce right now. I mean, we need to, if we're going to have this huge number of people that we need for AI, but also you can say a lot of the other technologies, all the things that we're doing in green energy, you know, everything from climate change, all the things that the bill in IRA money is there for, the billions of dollars that DOE is putting out into under-resourced communities and so forth. We have to have people out there that are the electricians, that are the plumbers, that are the scientists. And that means we just need a more robust workforce that really goes after every talent that we can possibly get. That means that all of the people that have never had an opportunity to do science or think about science because they couldn't afford to go to graduate school or they couldn't afford to go to college, we need to make sure that they can all be at the table too. And so what I worry about is to make sure that we can get all of the best talent in the world to really get behind the nation in ways that I believe the young people really want to have a solution to climate change and be part of it. But I'm not sure that they feel that they can do it right now. And so that's what I worry about. And that's why I want to applaud FAS again, because they're so important in this arena to help get the message out. And so,
Senator?
A couple of points. I think we just keep emphasizing the real upside potential, something I don't think we've touched much on tonight, but about artificial intelligence.
Sure.
About the ability to solve cancer, for people's lives to be extended longer.
Education, healthcare.
Yes, to make currently uninhabitable areas habitable, to ensure that young people, every young child around the world, by some estimates, will have a private individualized tutor to bring within their reach opportunity. So let's not have this message get lost. And then let's be honest about the very serious potential risks, which are inevitable, but we're smart people. Our previous generations have dealt with very daunting risks. Christopher has chronicled one of those such dramatic examples. I feel like we can meet this challenge again, but we're not going to do so if we're so dispirited and regard this technological, these possibilities as so inherently filled with risk and negativity that we're paralyzed by the concern.
Yeah, I would say, though, at the beginning of the early internet age, there was none of it. There was never a worry. It was always up and to the right. And I think it's appropriate to worry about, to be both equal,
I think
about the positives.
This evening, for example, I think we've done a good job highlighting the risks, talking openly about them. But I think that if we're paralyzed by these risks, then it will be dispiriting towards everyone. So that's my view on how to communicate about this.
Gene folding.
Yeah,
Yay.
there we go.
Killer robots, no. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's true. Clearly, there's a balance. You're talking about the development of new tools, but I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, the senators here being honored for this work with the CHIPS Act, and that you were asking earlier about comparisons with the Manhattan Project and all the rest. The fascinating thing about that approach to me is it's getting private industry to view particular technical innovation within a national context. And I think that's very important, actually, for security and for managing risk. So I think it represents real progress, and I think it suggests other ways in which that might be done.
Would Robert Oppenheimer be positive today?
I think that's really difficult to answer because the world in which he was living immediately post-Roosevelt, everything is about the United Nations. Everything is about the idea of essentially world government, and that I think there was a view that that was the direction of the world geopolitically, and that has not been the direction of the world geopolitically. And so it's very hard to speculate as to what somebody of that intellect and brilliance, with the ethical concerns and considerations he had, I certainly think a lot of what the FAS and all of us tonight talking about it, a lot of the principles that we gravitate towards in terms of managing the nuclear risk are things that he first spoke of. He was the first person to introduce a lot of these ideas, including mutually assured destruction, including the idea of the idea that weapons this powerful could end world wars, but would need to be managed through non-proliferation agreements, things like that. But the world has changed so much since he was alive. I'm not sure I could really speculate.
Yeah, you'd wonder what he'd be working on right now. I really appreciate this. Thank you. I do try to do an even-handed thing. Just so you know, a lot of the people working on AI right now, including Sam Altman, are working on small nuclear devices, which actually are pretty positive, shockingly. It sounds terrifying, but it's really pretty cool about energy and things like that. It's pretty neat. Cool. So that's to save time for the next discussion. Yeah. But thank you so much, everyone, and congratulations on their awards.